How much political power do you have? How much financial leverage do you command? How much social influence do you possess? How much of your life do you control? Now, there are no right or wrong answers to these questions. They are reflective gauges of individual stations in life and what we each are doing with ours. We have jobs, careers, responsibilities. We have duties and obligations. We have relationships, issues, problems, and fears. We all have insecurities and doubts, and we all have a conscience and a subconscious. And we each are complex individuals living in a complicated world. So, what exactly do we have control over? Our thoughts and responses. No matter our station in life, with those two, we all start on a level playing field. Think about what you can change in the world today. Not much, right? Now think about what you can change in your life today. Think for a moment about what you can change right now, today, in the interactions with your family, your neighborhood, your community. The answers to these questions boil down to how and why. If you want to change your life, do you want to change it to be more positive or negative? Now, that may sound like a crazy question, but we are all caught up in daily life, typically our own, as it unfolds hour by hour and progresses day by day. We try to get by, we try to get along, we try to get ahead. We juggle people, circumstances, emotions. You name it, we have an aspiration to have it, be it, or possess it. How many desires, wants, and wishes do we actually have control over? And I mean real control, meaning you're able to walk away from it if or when you need to. We are all living, but how alive are we in our mind, body, spirit working in concert? This can be a challenge in the 21st century. We are each a spirit upon arrival, occupying a soul, housed in a body with a processing mind. Our mind, body, spirit, and soul are together on a journey, traveling a path that stretches before each of us. Every individual in life is on a quest to understand and to be understood. In that way, we might know our place in our world. Coming to you from deep in the forest, near the banks of the Wachita River, you're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and you are my featured guest. Small Changes, Big Dividend is a show where your questions are part of the program. So if you have a question, email it to my website, branchisole.com. And thanks for joining me today. On Small Changes, Big Dividends, we talk about personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. Each week, I share mana'o with listeners from around the world. Today, I'm going to share some small changes that can pay big dividends in your relationships and in your life. Because life is about relationships, but it's healthy relationships that encourage and embrace growth. Today, I'm going to share a simple understanding of how you can change your entire life and the future direction of your life by doing one simple thing. Should you choose to hear it, understand it, and then implement it, you will now have the secret of changing your life every day in the future. From our first breath, we are each caught up in the world, inhaling its enveloping existence. After day one, no one remains unimpaired. For every person, life becomes a continuum, a series of chances, choices, changes, and consequences. It's often the little things that determine who we can, may, or will become. You're a complete package, having encountered crossroads your entire life. These choices and decisions have made you who you are today. The longer we're alive, the more we each become part of our singular changing world, and the more bonded to our life we start to become. In our pseudo matrix like realm, our energies are used, infused, modeled, molded, and muddled for and by the ways of the world. Are we an unwitting part of this system, or do we blindly buy into its temptations and offers, all of which are designed to engulf us first and foremost in self? The essence of our being is an electrical charge unit of the cosmos. When our spirit within our body is activated by and through a spiritual relationship, our choices start to produce fewer and fewer harmful consequences. Why? Because an activated spirit identifies challenges as growth opportunities, while an inactive spirit is silent, allowing habitual repetition of mistakes and errors that often result in suffering. So, what steps can you take today to ameliorate self-sabotaging thoughts of an inactive spirit? First, forgive your parents. Free yourself from by doing this one thing, and you can start on a journey of becoming your own person. Realize that your parents are or were just who they are or were. Like everyone who's walked on the planet, your parental influences were the grounding for their upbringing in nature. Each of them had a good, bad, or ugly experience, perhaps one that you saw, endured, embraced, or escaped from. Next, allow yourself to forgive the pain, anger, or animosity held tightly within against those who have harmed you on your path. It's only you who suffer the lingering, indignant emotions of those experiences. If these people are no longer in your life, then be done with them once and for all. If they are still in your life, you have work to do and decisions to confront. Are these two actions easy? Well, that depends on how much you continue to be emotionally invested in your anger or hurt feelings. Does this sound harsh? Perhaps. But the penultimate question remains, do you want to heal and become better or not? To make yourself whole in your being and existence, these two steps can be done going forward starting today. If your only desire is to feel sorry for yourself by refusing to overcome your past, that is where you have chosen to be and perhaps may stay. Our choice with every step on our future journey is to determine whether we will be whole, WHOLE, or will we stay in a hole, HOLE. For now, let's turn back to what we can control, our thoughts and responses. God's love for each of us is so great that He has designed our brains, our minds, with a unique ability. Like a supercomputer, our brains can process information literally at the speed of thought, or instantly. Our minds can change, analyze, prepare for, and respond to choices in nanomilliseconds, faster even than we ourselves can understand. But here's the true genius of God's loving design. We can only focus on one thought at a time. Think about that. Although the multiplicity of our brain's capabilities are innumerable, we can only actively focus on one thought at a time. This is the omniscience of God's love. He knew with our mind's processing capabilities, we would constantly be able to imagine wishes, desires, and actions. Combining our thought process ability with free will, we often manage to get ourselves into situations, issues, or problems that we've created. For this reason, He gave us the ability to focus only on a single active thought upon which to act in any singular moment. So, what does this mean? If you want to change your life, change your thoughts. How? Redirect or replace inappropriate or negative consequence thoughts with different options. Why should we do this? Because our thoughts become our actions become our habits become our character, and our character determines our destiny. So, if you want to change your life, change your thoughts, and then act accordingly. Now, about age 2, we start to understand the concept of right and wrong when we learn the consequences of the word no. As a result of early childhood learned behavior, we start to see each situation, each choice, each decision as an option between right and wrong. This is played out as reward or punishment. Because we're led to believe that the world is all about me, we look at every option in terms of what's in it for me, a reward or a punishment. This mindset keeps us focused on self in every situation we face. And the longer we embrace this all about me mindset, the more trapped by self we become. Our thoughts become a constant pursuit for self, and it becomes easier to dismiss or make excuses for the damage we may inflict on others, family, friends, or coworkers, as we tread this path only thinking about ourselves. Interestingly, the world encourages us to embrace this path, even though we may find ourselves mired in daily stress, struggle, or conflict. When we're born, we're a combination of mind, body, soul, and spirit, with the essence of our spiritual origination housed within our soul. We come to believe that right and wrong as the benchmarks for our responses to events, circumstances, and people. As we long to focus only on the right and wrong at the core of our intentions, our efforts will always then remain focused on ourselves. So, how do we get out of this cycle? We must change our perception about this right and wrong, reward and punishment model with new responses and actions grounded in moral and ethical responses. But how do we know what moral and ethical responses are? What do they look like? Morals and ethics are the responses grounded in truth and love. For those who believe in God as the creator of the universe and understand that God is spirit, then everything he created also has part of his spirit within it. And the closer we come to God, we begin to understand his character and nature, which we see as truth and love. Truth and love in action are moral and ethical responses. When we begin to see the truth in our life, we can start to identify the moral or ethical response in every situation. And when we respond morally and ethically, the consequence of each choice not only affects us, but it benefits and affects our family, our neighborhood, and our community. Moral and ethical responses focus on what's in it for us, not what's in it for me. So no matter your station in life, your career, your personal situation, the only decision you need to make in order to change the entire trajectory of your life starting today and into the future is simply to respond morally and ethically to the choices, decisions, and opportunities in your daily life. The day you start doing this, the stress, struggle, pressure, and conflict within your life will gradually start to reduce. Because the negative and the negativity that currently dogs your choices, focused on only what's in it for you, a reward or a punishment, keeps you trapped on a wheel of repetitious responses that will eventually fade from your daily interactions if you focus on the moral and or ethical outcome and choice in every situation. Now, next week, we're going to look closer at how to attain and use moral and ethical reality so that it benefits each time we employ it as part of our response to the people, circumstances, and events in our lives. We're going to take our first quick break. When we come back, I'm going to return to our study of prophecy. I've had a question from one of our listeners. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividend on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We'll be right back.
Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet every Monday at noon Eastern on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom on the BBM Global Network as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life. Tune into It's All About You with host Dr. Martha Latz, a lively weekly broadcast on BBM Global Network, one of the most empowering shows for time-starved, overscheduled multitaskers. The professional expertise of Dr. Latz is directly available live every Thursday at 1 p.m. to answer and address concerns about relationships, life transitions of career, meeting, dating, and committed relationships. It's All About You with Dr. Latz will expand your understanding of current concerns across your relationships by broadening and expanding possible solutions in developing skills for mutually desired outcomes. Dr. Martha's expertise is as a licensed marriage and family therapist, life, transition coach, and all things to do with communication at work, home, and with friends. Check out her website at auniquetherapycenter.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We just finished our series on prophecy, but I had a question from a listener And I'd like to address this question because it's important for anybody who's watching the Gaza conflict currently in the Middle East. This conflict between Israel and the Palestinian Hamas factions is not a current phenomenon. The war in Gaza that we are witnessing is one of God's prophetic end time events. It's described in Psalm 83, verses 1 through 8. Since the beginning of time for humans and for their biological predecessors, it was only natural that prehistoric people and their descendants were in awe of the powers that they faced in nature. From the earliest times of our human collective experience, people have attributed to the forces of nature different labels by which mythology took root and developed. The easiest way to attribute identification of such powerful forces was to give it names that could then be used to descriptively refer to as gods. Groups, tribes, and collections of people embraced mythology for its purposeful and powerful gods that were then passed down through generations for education and life applications. And as a result, people practiced polytheistic worship, that is, belief in and worship of many gods. 4,000 years ago, out of the Mideast polytheistic world came a nomadic herdsman named Abram, who was living in southern Iraq. Abram came to know God and abandoned the many gods of his day as he communed and grew in a relationship with God as a monotheistic deity. As Abram's spiritual awareness and connectivity with the Lord deepened, his life was changed and he was materially blessed. God subsequently instructed Abram to leave Iraq and go to Canaan, a land that God had told him he would inherit for his continued faith and belief. This land of Canaan would eventually become known as Palestine. As is custom in Middle East families, the firstborn son is always first in line to inherit all his father's possessions. Abram's wife, Sarai, couldn't have children, so she instructed her handmaiden, Hagar, to become pregnant with Abram so he would have a son to inherit his wealth. At this time, nomadic herdsmen like Abram were known as Hebrews. And while Abram and Sarai were Hebrews, Hagar, the handmaid, was Egyptian. During Hagar's pregnancy, Sarai became jealous and started to mistreat the pregnant Hagar. So she ran away. While she was in the desert, an angel appeared and told Hagar to return home because the Lord would make her son the father of a great people. Hagar returned and gave birth to a son named Ishmael. Abram now had a son to pass on his wealth, possessions, and inheritance to. Years later, Abram had an encounter with the heavenly messenger who explained God's plans for Abram and Sarai. God made a covenant with Abram, which included new names for him and his wife Sarai. They would be called Abraham and Sarah going forward. Sarah soon gave birth to a son named Isaac. And after Isaac was born, Sarah became jealous, thinking that Ishmael, the firstborn, would inherit everything. So she convinced Abraham to exile Hagar and Ishmael from the camp. Ishmael had been the apple of Abram's eye, but he did as Sarah requested, banishing Hagar and Ishmael. As they languished in the desert, an angel of the Lord again came to rescue them. Ishmael would go on to have 12 sons who would each become a patriarch in the Arab world. With Hagar and Ishmael gone, Abraham's full attention was on his son Isaac. Isaac would also have two sons, Esau and Jacob. Esau and Jacob were twins, but Esau was born first, so he would become the claimant to Isaac's wealth through inheritance. Years later, in a dispute, Esau would give his birthright to his younger brother Jacob, and Jacob became the presumptive head of the household and inheritor of Abraham's wealth. Like Abraham and Isaac before him, Jacob also had an encounter with God, where God told Jacob his new name would be Israel, and through him would be born a great nation. This came to pass, and Israel had 12 sons, just like Ishmael. So every Israeli and Arab battling today and in conflict with each other for the past 4,000 years all trace their ancestral linkage back to Abraham as patriarch of their family or clan. The Jews have an ancestral linkage back to Abraham through Jacob and Isaac. Those in the Arab world have that same ancestral linkage back to Abraham through Ishmael. So Jews and Arabs today, who are descendants of the same two stepbrothers, Ishmael and Isaac, both had Abraham as their biological father. The land God promised he would give to Abraham went from the Wadi River in Egypt to the Euphrates River in Iraq, and included all of the land of Canaan, where Canaanites and later Palestinians lived. If you watch the news today, you'll see on the maps of Gaza, the Wadi is the dividing line between Gaza's northern section and southern section. So the land of Canaan would become Palestine, and in May 1948, Palestine would become Israel. So think of it this way. Whatever state or region you live in now, if your ancestors lived in and occupied that area since antiquity, regardless of its label, you would probably consider it your homeland. Arabs living in Canaan were Canaanites, both when Abraham arrived, as well as when his Hebrew descendants left Canaan for Egypt. The Canaanites were still there. And even though the land would later become known as Palestine, the descendants of Canaan and then Palestine to this day still consider that land to be theirs. The Jews claim this land as theirs, bequeathed by God to their patriarch Abraham 4,000 years ago. The land of Palestine was given to the Jews and renamed Israel in a single day, May 14, 1948, by the politics of and through the United Nations. So between this birthright question, this lineage inheritance belief, and claims of land promised to the Jews, yet occupied as a Palestinian homeland, we are currently witnessing a Mideast struggle that's been going on for 4,000 years, as Israelis and Palestinians who both claim ancestral ownership of the same land. Now, what's going to happen in this Gaza conflict? Well, obviously, the Israelites, the Jews, the army of Israel is going to keep pressuring until they've accomplished whatever goals they've set out. The humanitarian fallout from this conflict is going to go worldwide, and it's going to be a topic of the news for many months to come. The result is the division between Israel and the Arab world will grow deeper, but the division between Israel and the rest of the world will start to crack and grow deeper. Why is this important? Because regardless of the military outcome and or the humanitarian outcome of the current Gaza conflict, is going to set up a situation where Israel is shunned throughout the world. And they will be a pariah among nations, both politically and in the streets among people who are demonstrating about the extent of the humanitarian disaster and the numbers of people harmed and killed. This will in turn then set up a situation where the world starts to fall farther and farther away from its support of Israel in all ways. And out of this will come the next great prophecy that we're going to witness, which will be the Ezekiel war, as described in Ezekiel 37, 38, and 39. We're going to pause for our second commercial break. When we return, we're going to answer 3 questions from listeners in our audience. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We'll be right back.
Have you ever wondered why some children recover from their symptoms of autism while others never seem to get any better? After 13 years of research, Karen Thomas has recovered her own son from his symptoms of autism naturally. She now shares how she did it with you in her free webinar so that you can have the right resources and knowledge to help your child. The definition of recovery is to regain health. Karen offers this to you in 4 stages: healing the gut, natural heavy metal detoxification, balancing the co-infections of autism, brain support, and repair. Register now for this free webinar to help you know what you can do to help your child to sleep better, be more calm, improve focus, and reach their fullest potential to live a happy, healthy life. Go to naturallyrecoveringautism.com/free workshop, empowering parents with the resources to naturally recover autism from a mom who's done it. Mike Zorek, a 3-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a 6-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2 thirds, and 2 fourths. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. This week, we have 3 different questions that have been sent in to the website. The first one comes from Trish in North Carolina, who says, "Your work sounds very interesting because you write in 4 different genres. I'm intrigued by an author who can write both spiritual books and erotica. How can this be?" Well, Trish, thanks for your question. Yes, that combination may seem a bit at odds, but is it really? Although my work is primarily presented as short story, poetic prose, my subject matter and characters span a spectrum of adult issues and emotions and common behaviors in wide relationship swings. These include both spirituality and sexuality, both of which are active for many and engaging for most. We have the potential to be both spiritual and sexual beings. Remember, we are 2 people. We are a human person and we are a spiritual person. The key to balance is getting those two as close to equilibrium as possible, meaning that we give as much energy to our daily life as human interaction as we do with our spiritual interaction between us and our spiritual goal or whoever it is we worship and commune with. The manner and depth to which we express our humanity in either or both is an individual choice. As a writer, I simply observe and comment on the activities, nuances, motivations, and behaviors that I see in the world around me. As an author, I attempt to connect with different readers on different levels by addressing and exploring areas of interest for different reading groups. Therefore, in my catalog, you'll find poetry, short story prose, spirituality, intimacy, and self help publishing. One aspect of my job as a writer is to entice and encourage readers to remove the masks and blinders and see their world and its truth. That can include good, not so good, and even worse situations. The world is not black and white, nor two dimensional, and neither are we as individuals. I believe it's the writer's duty to join his readers on the path that they share thoughts, ideas, and opinions. As I said in a recent interview, my readers' intents and mine are much the same. I just happen to write mine down. Now, my works are not for everyone. However, I don't believe in censorship other than self-censorship. If you don't agree or like something, don't go there. Change the channel. Read something else. But allow those who wish to explore their world an opportunity to do so. This is the mindset I try to recognize and write about within a variety of commonalities and differences that we all share. Trish, I hope this helps explain a little bit about that conflict you see between the spiritual and the sexual. But the catalog offers many different books with many different themes and stories, characters that you can engage in. Thank you so much. Our second question is from Martha in Cleveland, Ohio, who says, my son has several tattoos which I find repulsive, but he has them. Is there anything in the Bible about tattoos? Thanks for asking, Martha. Actually, there is. Many Christians today have wondered or asked about tattoos and piercings and whether or not these can affect one's spiritual walk. Many on the political and social conservative right decry the voluminous and multitudinous numbers of tattooed and pierced bodies in their midst. They often regard this activity as apostate and use it to display upon the body temple, often leads to clamor for automatic denunciation. To those in the Christian community contemplating or asking about that first tat or inquiring as to a new or additional inking or piercing, the book of Leviticus describes God's precept given to Moses as part of the laws. It's in Leviticus 19:28 that the Bible simply says, do not put tattoo marks on yourself. However, as with most of what God has for us as listeners and hearers of his word, this directive has a twofold meaning. First, our bodies hold a God-given spirit and a soul connection between us and him. It's by this conceptual reasoning that the human body is often described as or inferred to as a temple. The second is more discreet, as it refers to God's desire that we have no idols as the primary desire of our hearts, which are placed before Him. Those things that we idolize are often evidenced by a wish to extol or parade their prominence, and the profound emotional attachments that people can sometimes have represent much to their inner being or soul. Early in history, mankind struggled with the natural elements of his world, as we described before. And within a framework and illumination, mythological gods came to represent those powers. Humans were better able to understand and explain their inherent smallness or weakness, in contrast to one of the many omnipotent presences in mythological gods. Tattooings and piercings are but two examples of devotional displayed images that can reinforce and relegate God's presence or existence to non-preferential status. Now, resplendent glory to gods has been expressed through many modeling behaviors. For believers within the Christian faith, as fundamental as Leviticus' directive against tattooing is, we also find in the book of John a codicil in Christ's own words, which helps us to see God's love and acceptance of those tattooed, pierced, or not. Jesus is recorded in John 15:22 as saying, "If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin." Now, this statement, while not relieving the listener of responsibility, does allow for forgiveness. So, having heard the words of Christ, coupled with a desire and choice to follow his model of behavior, we are now accountable for future actions after hearing New Testament teachings from Jesus Christ. Prior to hearing his words or reading his words or becoming observant followers of his examples, we are often ignorant in the ways of our journey on our path back to God. As self-proclaimed followers of Christ, we acknowledge and repent, allowing for change in our future actions or similar circumstances. Repentance is not about doing good from what we used to do badly or was considered bad. Repentance actually means changed future behavior or changed future actions. Meaning, if I'm in a similar or same situation where my past responses or behaviors were not in my best interest as a Christian believer, I have the opportunity in my future actions to not go to that past behavior place. Now, having seen and heard differences in our own lives, we can embrace new possibilities that Christ offers in his teachings, because God is more concerned about how we accept and if we accept his love and it is tattooed on our hearts than he is ink or penetrations that might adorn our skin. Jesus describes this, Martha, as the difference between what may have taken place, cloaked in the shadows of past ignorance, versus what we might now do in the light of our changed and present understanding. He simply sums it up this way: let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. So I'd like to thank those three listeners for their questions this week. I know they were all different areas of interest, and I just wanted to make it appear and seem to them that you can ask any question, and if I can answer it, I will. And we're going to finish up and take our third and final break. And when we come back, we'll do our last question from Kiana in Toronto, Canada. She writes, I see you're a poet. I've read several of your poems and your YouTube channel, and I have a question. What ever happened to poetry? So, Kiana will answer your question when we come back from the break. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical. Have you ever wondered why some children recover from their symptoms of autism while others never seem to get any better? After 13 years of research, Karen Thomas has recovered her own son from his symptoms of autism naturally. She now shares how she did it with you in her free webinar so that you can have the right resources and knowledge to help your child. The definition of recovery is to regain health. Karen offers this to you in 4 stages: healing the gut, natural heavy metal detoxification, balancing the co-infections of autism, brain support, and repair. Register now for this free webinar to help you know what you can do to help your child to sleep better, be more calm, improve focus, and reach their fullest potential to live a happy, healthy life. Go to naturallyrecoveringautism.com/free workshop, empowering parents with the resources to naturally recover autism from a mom who's done it.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We're going to answer our third question. I didn't want to interrupt halfway through for Kiana as we took our second break. Kiana in Toronto asks, whatever happened to poetry? Kiana, if you're like many people, the last or perhaps only exposure you might have had to poetry was in a high school English class. For most readers, poetry as a viable genre is either MIA or non-existent. While poetry is often viewed as forgotten in the literary family, the majority of its devotees and followers remain aspiring poets. Poetic prose is literature's original art form. It's been with mankind virtually since the beginning. Today, poetry is often thought to be staid or archaic to a point of exclusion. However, its historical roots go back to the first humans, sitting around fires, telling stories of survival, traditions, and ancestry. These oral renditions were retold to successive generations because they set the stage for epic tales which became the mainstay of both literature and theater for evolving empires and civilizations. Poetic fables were often used as short morality vignettes, which would draw in listeners to the action and the character plights. Using a variety of expositions or expressions, including rhymes, songs, choral refrains, and descriptive dialogues, all were used to tell stories. Throughout the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, poetry achieved growth and glory as it provided both entertainment and education for masses of illiterate people. During the Enlightenment period of the 17th and 18th centuries, poetry attained its pinnacle position in literature, which then gave birth to its many diverse forms and eventually led to the fundamental rejoinders of musical lyrics that people have enjoyed singing since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and throughout the 20th century. Today, most people have been exposed to or have assimilated poetic rhymes from childhood fairy tales and their earliest bedtime stories. Poetry's pre-reading introduction has helped millions to form, learn, and establish foundational pillars of the reading process. So, where has poetry gone? Why does poetry currently live in the literary shadows? Poetry still offers readers opportunity for growth and enjoyment because poetry is unique. Only poetry can tell a story with a beginning, middle, and end in bite-sized, brief, or concise formats or lengths. Only poetry can offer an emotional pull and connection to every reader, regardless of age, gender, social, economic, or political preference. Only poetry can represent and jump from plot to plot, character to character, scene to scene with transitional ease. Only poetry can be employed as a style application for every literary genre. Only poetry makes use of themes, events, and lessons of life in quick, easy to read presentations. And only poetry is the perfect match for a Twitter reading world. So, where is poetry? It's alive and well. You may have to look a little harder or dig a little deeper, but poetry is everywhere. So go ahead. Kiana, read a poem today. You'll recognize the joy because a poet lives in each of us. So thanks to Martha, Kiana, and Trish for their questions. We're going to take our final commercial break, and when we're back, we'll talk about next week. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We'll be right back.
Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Master of words, powerful player. What life-changing words can Dr. Janet Smith Warfield pull out of her magical toolbox that just might mysteriously open a door you never knew was there? A door to free yourself from fear forever. Transform your rage into right action. Release your guilt. Position you into a life of freedom, purpose, passion, power, and peace. All quite suddenly, unexpectedly, and almost miraculously, with no effort on your part. Join Dr. Janet every Monday at noon Eastern on Dancing with Words, Dancing with Wisdom on the BBM Global Network as she and her guests show you how words map our experiences, immersing you in a sound bath that relaxes your muscles, opens your mind, and supports you in co-creating your extraordinary life.
Welcome back. You're listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. We're going to change our format going forward. We're going to have 3 different sections each show. The first section will deal with personal, career, and spiritual growth. The second section will deal with prophecy, end times, and last days. In the third section, like today, we'll be answering questions from our listeners. So if you've got a question about personal growth, spiritual growth, or career growth, about improving relationships, about getting farther in your life than you ever thought possible, be sure to keep joining us and send in your questions. Thanks for joining me today. On Small Changes, Big Dividend, we're talking about essentials for growth-filled living. If you know someone who could benefit from today's episode, please share it with them. If today's show has been helpful for you, please give us a rating and review. And to know more about my work, I invite you to go to my website, branchisole.com, or my YouTube channel, Branch Isole. Today's show has been sponsored by Crystal Creek Farm. If you have a business, a product, or a service, and you'd like to share it with the world on Small Changes, Big Dividends, send your inquiry to the website. You've been listening to Small Changes, Big Dividend on the Bold Brave Media Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. Until next week, all the best.
This has been Small Change, Big Dividends. When you're ready for healthier, more successful relationships at home or work, Small Change, Big Dividends is your show. Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.